Hi, my name is Phoenix, and my dad is an ambassador for the Enneagram Prison Project.
Hi, my name is Clay, and this is the Enneagram Prison Project podcast. In this episode, the tables are turned as Rick and Susan take the reins and guide us in a conversation with me, where I answer their questions about a very important date 16 years ago, May 21st, 2007, the day the good began. But before we get to that, I'd like to take a second real quick to ask you to leave us a rating or a review in the podcast app, wherever you might be listening to this right now, whether it's Spotify or Apple or wherever else the podcast is found. We'd love to hear from you and know what you think. We're glad you're here. Thanks for listening. This is the Enneagram Prison Project podcast.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
This is just a conversation, so you know.
Thank you.
And we have plenty of what do you call it? Of disk space. So,
Yes.
We can go for a long time here, Clay.
It looks like 34 hours.
34 hours, Clay. We have plenty. I've got plenty of disk space, so you can say whatever you want to say.
Thank you.
Are you comfortable, Clay, with the headphones and the mic switch and all that stuff?
I am. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome.
It's been a while for me.
Mm-hmm.
I think 24 hours.
Well, just so you know, anything you say you will be used against you.
I have the right to remain silent. Thank you. That's funny. It's funny already.
We're already cooking with gas. Clay, I'd like to know right now, what's going on for you? What are you feeling?
I feel good. That's for sure. We're sitting on the front porch here, and this is the second one that I've recorded outside this weekend. And I like being outside. The weather allows for it, and the surroundings are great. So I feel good, like physically. Got good sleep last night. And I love traveling out here. I love hanging out, out here on the West Coast. It's fun. And I feel good. And I feel mostly happy. And I don't think the mostly is an indication of that there's a lack of happiness. I'm mostly, like, of all the words I would use, I think happy probably in this moment is probably the most accurate.
I love that not just asking, hearing your answer to how are you feeling is like watering the plants I watered this morning that were like all this water just sort of like sat at the top and then it all just seeped through. Yep. And you have layers and layers of things. And I'm just going to get right into it because today feels like a auspicious day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, God, I got to look that up. What does auspicious mean?
Rick? I just turned to Rick when these sorts of things. He knows. He could have been an English major.
I feel like that's an AU.
Oh, yeah.
And then like a
SP.
CIOUS. Okay, we'll look it up. I'll just read the definition if you want.
But we have Rick.
Auspicious is...
Oh, yeah, you put him on the spot. Yeah, right.
So auspicious is a day, it's a thing that is important and of high importance, or has something that is historically relevant.
How do you do, Clay?
Today is auspicious. Yeah, the definition I found, it is good. That actually feels more accurate to this than what Google says, but they say that it's conducive to success or favorable.
Oh, we'll take them both.
Yeah, and also a later definition is given or being a sign of future success. Mm-hmm. So that works.
Well, if they both work, how come? Why is today an auspicious day?
So as we sit, it is May 21st and
2023.
2023, correct. And it would be funny if we recorded this like 4 years ago and we're just now letting people hear it. May 21st. Today is the anniversary of the day that I turned myself in. When I called the police and I said, "Hey, I got some information about some crimes," and it was me. So come turn myself in. And it was a big day. And I tell people often when I talk about, like I don't celebrate my birthday. I think a lot of people know that. And holidays in general, like I'm not super sentimental with a lot of like dates on the calendar, and I'm not like anti-celebration. It's just they don't mean a lot to me a lot of times. But 2 dates on my calendar mean a lot. One of those is the day that I got out of prison. I celebrate that by traveling somewhere every year. And that's a little easier, I think, for people to understand why I would celebrate that. And then May 21st is the other one, which is the day that I turn myself in, which might be a little bit odd to celebrate, I think, for some people. And I don't travel necessarily on May 21st. This is the first time that I think I've been away from home outside of work or something like that in a while, maybe ever. But today is 16 years since May 21st, 07, where I turned myself in. And as the way that I call it is the day the good began.
Right.
Yeah.
What a great thing about using the word auspicious, Susan.
It's a perfect word. It's a really good word. I'm trying to find any words that are perfect. The pre-recorded conversation we had, but yeah, it is the highly accurate.
Well, we appreciate you sharing any of your days with us here up on the hill, as we call it, but especially this one. And I want to drop into it. I want to know a lot. And I think Rick and I are going to tag team. I'll go first because this one's just obvious. And it's like it's a softball, but it just is going to be like, well, it'll be what it is. What does freedom mean to you?
Ooh, we're just going right there.
It didn't go to plot first, just go straight to the.
I was going to take the first pitch and see what I'm working with here. A lot of baseball this weekend. What freedom means to me, it is a complete. It's a complete lack of restriction, not only physically but also, like emotionally, mentally, and all the humorously, or all the different things you can think of, all the ways that we live life. It means that the door is open rather than here is the path, walk down that path. And to me, freedom is I have choices instead of having options, I suppose. I have a young one leaving. If y'all want to say bye.
Bye, Gavin.
Bye, Gavin.
He's going to love that.
Yeah. But I think options, the difference to me between options and choices is, I don't know, maybe I'm digging too far into it, but whereas like if somebody else says you have to do this or that, it doesn't feel like freedom to me, even though there's technically some choice or some options in that. But freedom to me means like, where am I? What can I do? What can I feel? What can I think? What can I, all that stuff. What can I ... And then the answer is where the freedom is.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll just ask, maybe to anyone that's listening, it's an obvious follow-up, but I'm sure to some people it isn't. How is it that turning yourself in to prison is the key, to opening the door and giving yourself, how do you put it, a complete lack of restriction emotionally and mentally? That is an oxymoron if ever I heard one.
Yeah, I mean, it's so before I went and turned myself in, I was miserable. I was so depressed. I had no idea where I was going or what I was doing or what life, what mattered, what did I matter. I mean, everything was sheer and absolute, just like, blech. I hated life. And there were a lot of reasons for that were out of my control, but there were a lot of reasons that were in my control. Like I'd been, committing crimes. I'd left my wife when she was pregnant. I didn't have a whole lot of presence with my kid's first, few months. At that point, he was, 8-ish months old, and I wasn't around much for that. So I was miserable for a lot of reasons. And so the thing about going to jail and just having a conversation with somebody, because all this was private and secret. So there were private stuff that involved other people, like, my marriage and my relationship with my family. And then there were also the secrets, like I'd been robbing banks for a year. And so to be able to talk to somebody, even though it was a detective, like it was not like a close friend I didn't even know the guy. But just to be able to get this, I don't want to say off my shoulders, but it was just like out of my head. Like I'm tired of carrying this. I don't want this to be part of my life anymore. There's actually a lot of probably, it actually feels like a religious experience almost, where you like confess your sins and get right with God and all that stuff. And that is absolutely not what I was doing on a spiritual or religious level, but it was totally what I was doing for me and anybody who might be involved. Just go and just let somebody else know about it, and whatever happens. I'm tired of living, this life that's not fun.
But in a way, I think that's so beautiful that you're naming the spiritual experience that it was, even though you wouldn't put it in that context for yourself, because you were coming clean. You were getting right with the most important person, who is you, and that is a spiritual experience, no matter when it happens or how.
Yeah, there's a lot of power in saying I fucked up. Like I did something I shouldn't have done. I'm living a way that I shouldn't be living. I am not in alignment with what is right, good, any of that. There is a almost tangible feeling, for me at least there was, of I could sit up a little straighter and I could have a little bit more like self-respect and just say I did all this shit, and what are we going to do about it?
And as you said that, getting off your shoulders, out of your head, really it's dropping into your heart. So maybe just take a moment right now as you're saying it and recalling it. It seems like something's physically going on over there. Checking in with your heart.
It's rattling. Like I still remember what that felt like, calling 911 and saying, "Hey, I got some information," or whatever, and not even knowing how to articulate what I wanted to do. And it actually feels a lot. There's a certain like baby-like quality to not knowing what to say, but you just make noise and hope the adults know what the fuck to do. And clearly it wasn't that limited. I had language and I did call and I did say and all that stuff, but there was still a lot of uncertainty and not even knowing if what I was doing was right or smart or whatever. And it's not comfortable to remember. Like I don't enjoy thinking about it. I'm glad that it happened and I celebrate it. And it was also very like uncomfortable. It was the earlier parts of all that, especially because there was so little that I knew. And I was trusting people. I was trusting a system that I didn't believe in. I was trusting people that I didn't know and just making a phone call and just kind of, I'm not really known for my leaps of faith.
Well, I'm going to just do something we've been doing all weekend and I'll say, were you though? Because and you can tell us either way, and Rick's got a follow up for this one, but it seems to me that you were doing this thing that we teach when we teach our curriculum, which is that there's in the gut center of intelligence, which you have, even though you don't live there as a 5, right? There is a knowing without thinking. There's a knowing without even feeling. There's a knowing beyond that knowing. And it seems to me you were perhaps coming from that place that overrode those other people, the system, all those other things. I don't know if you were actually trusting them. I'm just curious.
That makes sense. I mean, I didn't know how it all worked at that point. So that's actually probably more accurate to say that I sensed that this was where what I should be doing and where I should be going. And actually, I'm more rattled thinking about it than I actually was that day. I was actually pretty until the SWAT team showed up, at least I was pretty calm for most of the day, like the bus ride down, and it's very heavy, but I don't remember, I wasn't biting my nails off or anything like that. I think I did. Maybe that's the thing that I'm saying was a step of faith, is actually just the intuitive knowing that this is absolutely the next step to take. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm hearing what you're saying, and that was a great thing, Susan, to kind of lead with. I wonder, you use this, or maybe I just want to call out, you were trusting the system. Is that really what you were doing? Or were you trusting in something larger? Were you trusting in yourself or that, I mean, was it the system that you were trusting?
No, that's actually not, I'm glad you called that out because that's probably not accurate. I didn't know enough even about the system to trust it. I think what I trusted was I've been doing it plenty wrong on my own, and I trust that there's something better.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and so it's not that. Well, the jail sure will know what to do with me because they have such a good record of that. It's nothing like that. It was more like a lack of trust in continuing with what I was doing.
Right.
And knowing that there was something better to do. And that was also that was a part of it. It wasn't like the whole thing. It wasn't like this intuitive draw, like I must go do this thing. There was also a lot of other things. Like I was a dad at that point, and I barely ever saw my kid. And I didn't want to be alive. I didn't want to stay around. And it was heartbreaking to think about what that even meant or what that meant. So there was a bit of the intuitive knowing, but there was also there was this bit about like jail felt safe. Like it felt like it was somewhere I could go and just be alive a little longer at least. And for a lot of my life, I thought probably wouldn't see it my 30th birthday. And, I was 28 years old at this point, almost 28. And so it wasn't, I don't want to make it sound like it was one thing where I just had this urge and then followed it. It was a lot of things. Part of it was the intuition. Part of it was the logic. There was and also, I mean, the emotion. I was so depressed. I was just devastated with life, and I didn't know what to do. And it just made sense. Like, of course I'll go to jail. If I don't, it's over.
Right. Susan has, in different articles and different things that she's written, she talks about the holding cell. And, you've kind of referenced here this lack of holding of yourself and this looking for holding somewhere else or the potential of holding.
So funny that they do have the holding cell. I never thought of it that way as far as like that.
Well, it's not that way.
it's the lack of holding
it's
cell.
the irony of it, right?
It's actually. So when I actually got to the jail, I actually physically was treated fairly decently. Like even from the moment I had handcuffs on me, the way that the police talked to me and treated me was with this weird and almost respectful curiosity and like, what are you doing? Like it was weird. It was actually really strange because a few minutes, like they scared the shit out of me when the actual arrest itself was very like very typical with what you would expect, like the yelling, do this, do that.
Actually, Can you back up because people who don't know your story, you need this context. So if you can, there were some major shock points, maybe a handful. You'll know. Yeah. You can tell us that preceded the decision to turn yourself in. That Henry Cloud moment when the pain of staying the same was greater than the pain of changing. What were they?
Well, the one thing to speak to the pain of staying the same for several months before that. I mean, May of 2007 is when I finally turned myself in, and then 4 or 5 months. It's fine. The audio it'll either sound cool or we can edit out the car noise. But I do feel really good.
It wasn't actually cars.
What was it?
They were skateboarders.
Oh, skateboard. Oh, the longboard, crazy people. Yeah, cool. I was wondering why it took so long. So the months leading up to that, I kind of knew what I was going to do, and I'd made decisions based off the last robbery that I did, where I didn't enjoy it. It wasn't fun. It wasn't exciting. It was all the things that had kind of drawn me to keep doing that stuff. All of them were gone, and in their place were things like I felt guilty, like not as a criminal, but as a dad. Like my kid at that point was 2 months old, 2 months and a week. And it was very shameful to think, oh, like I have a baby and I'm robbing this bank. And I didn't like it. And it was a very definite, I'm done. And then now what? And so I tried to figure out, like, go back to normal work, or, did I want to reconcile with my wife who I was separated from, and just like finding anything that felt good about life. And I couldn't, like, nothing felt good. And, I couldn't see like friends. I couldn't go to like family gatherings, not for lack of permission or invitation, but like I couldn't bring myself to be around people. And I didn't, everything I did hurt. I mean, even the people that I had only recently made friends with, who didn't really know much about anything, I just felt a lot of shame and misery. And so when you talk about like the pain of staying the same, actually the same was actually like leapfrogging from one thing to the next. Like, can I just find some level of anything that's positive or just not miserable, actually?
You also said this interesting thing, Clay, about how the last robbery wasn't exciting anymore. So at some level, that leaping to that thing, or maybe each next bank, gave you something that you couldn't generate just in your day-to-day. Is that it?
Yeah, life was boring. And I didn't know how. I think I was trying to, I don't know enough about the neurobiology of it, but I was looking for a hit that didn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to cover up and mask things that aren't maskable. Like I just wasn't dealing with anything.
And maybe your body's own, organic chemistry wasn't able to allow you to have this regulation, this sense of normalcy that could give you joy and deal with the lows and the highs that came with things. And it feels to me, it was a bit of an escape, the bank robbing.
100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It wasn't, I wouldn't call them joyful experiences. They're like, it's I actually don't know how to describe this. It's like just doing crazy shit just because what else am I going to do?
Well, you get a hit of adrenaline and then it feels good for a minute, but just like anything, then that goes away and you're still left with Clay.
Right. Which is not who I wanted to be or have or be left with or any of that. So
the last shock point was doing the robbery and it not doing for you what it used to do. And it also sounds like the birth of your son, 2 months and 1 week. That's your, I know you're 5. The specificity with which you remember that tells me that it was a poignant thing, your boy being born.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a big deal. I mean, I had, there was a lot of pain around that too with our relationship, mine and my ex-wife, my son's mom. It wasn't like a fully joyful experience that happened, but when, when my kid was here, I saw him and held him, and it was like, this little guy, like I fill a role that nobody else ever will be able to, period. And I don't have a good relationship with my dad. I don't have a relationship with my dad, actually. It's not even a bad one. It's just I don't have one. And that, I was with my dad all through my childhood and early adulthood. So it's not like he was never there. Like, I lived with him and he's part of who raised me. So I know my dad. And so just to be clear, like, it's not that he's absent from birth, but there was a lot of things about childhood that I wish my dad was better at, actually, different with. And it's so odd to have a baby and to know, like, it's a clean slate. Like, I can do as well as I can. I can fuck up as much as I can too. Like, the option, it's all there. Like, how like, it's a blank slate, and what can I do with it? And I didn't think I could be a good dad, but I wanted to be. It was really important to me to think, like, how can I really succeed at this whole fatherhood thing? And for my kid to grow up and be proud, of his dad, and to have to want to like call me, and to want to go do things, and all the stuff that I don't want with my dad. And there was such a disconnect between what I wanted and how to do it. And that was a bummer. Like I didn't feel equipped or prepared or any of that stuff. But I knew I had the urge. Like I wanted to be like a badass dad, like a rock star, like somebody that somebody would want to grow up to be.
So if I'm getting the sequence right, tell me how it is really. You were struggling with this lack of connection to yourself, but it was manifesting in relationship with the
mother of your child, and with your child was newborn.
That's right.
Yeah.
And somewhere in the space of that, despite robbing banks, which gave you this big hit and rush, and how do some people get away and some people don't, then when that wears off, what you were contemplating was not some other crime to commit. What you were contemplating was, how do I have a meaningful relationship with this boy, with my children? How do I have significance in a way, heal the thing that I didn't get?
Yeah. Yeah. And babies don't deserve less than all. And it's not their fault when they don't get all. And it's, I have more language now to say what I was feeling then. Like at the time, I don't actually think I could have said that sentence, but I just knew, like, this is such a big deal. And I think that I want to figure this shit out, because I don't want to. I've been so comfortable with failure for all my life, and this was probably the biggest moment where I was like, I don't want. That's not a test I want to fail, and it's too big, And there's also a indescribable connection between parent and child, where, like, part of it I can't even articulate. Like, this is part of me. Like, he's his own human. Like, it's not literally, but I felt that this was just as much a part of me as my hand. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to disconnect. It's part of me.
It's like your heart is walking outside of itself in somebody else's body.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anybody who has ever had a child, or sometimes even just seen one, held one, can know a sense of that.
That's the thing.
I'd really like to put a pin in this, and maybe we can come back to it after you go through all the different shock points. But I'd like to put a pin in this, the statement that you said about around failure, and that you have become comfortable and felt failure your whole life, because that is not how I know you. We were just playing chess minutes ago, and you were just taking me apart. I've seen you pick up things and do things that are extraordinary. And so I'm curious about that. I'm willing to put a pin in it until you get finished, Susan, with the...
Well, is it part of your...
I want to actually say to the chess piece part, I've recently changed my style of play. It's also something we've talked about a few times this weekend, where if you've seen my style of play is very high risk. And if it works, awesome. And if it fails, whatever. Like for anybody who knows chess, like trading a knight for 2 pawns is typically terrible, right? Mm-hmm. And that's how I play most of the time. And only recently have I decided I'm actually not going to do that anymore. I want to step it up a little bit. So does it? I mean, it makes sense. Does it make sense actually?
I'm wondering if this, the adrenaline piece that you talked about a little bit earlier is actually been playing out in different ways. Foosball. Yeah. Right.
What is the most high risk, high reward thing that I can do right now?
Right.
And results be damned. I'm going to try it.
Right. If the best case scenario for you is you sack your queen for the victory.
Right.
And you're trying desperately to do that.
Yeah.
Right.
And if I lose, it's not really failure, actually. It was just exciting to try.
Right. But I would love to come back to, or at least start this part about failure, going back in time for little Clay and being associated or associating yourself with failure?
Well, the first thing I think of is school and like grades and how laughable that whole experience was, and how I did not connect at all with the importance of making good grades. I didn't. I thought I felt disrespected as a child that they needed me to prove that I could spell a word or that I could do math. Like, of course I can. Like that was, which I am very aware of how arrogant that sounds, but that's how I live. That's how I thought. That's how I felt. How I went about life was I'm not going to prove to you that I know this.
But we also know that arrogance is a cover. So what were you covering as a little guy?
Well, it felt, I felt that it felt condescending just based on my age, that this person thought that I knew less than they did. And I think the arrogance was a way to announce to the world, I know what the fuck I'm talking about. Like I know how to spell, brilliant.
And if people, and auspicious now.
Yeah.
And if people could have looked past the arrogance, that cover, what would they have seen was going on inside of you?
That's a good one. I don't know. I think I actually didn't want to be, I just wanted to learn, and I just wanted to have fun. I just wanted to communicate and connect with other people. And to me, this idea of testing and doing all the school stuff, and it wasn't just the testing, it was also the sit down and don't talk. It was, these are the rules. The desks are in a row for a reason. You'll walk single file in the hallway. Like it was the whole experience of school for me was very submissive. And I felt that, and again, I didn't have this language at the time, obviously. Just looking back, I can say with my adult words what I felt as a child was I felt very diminished, and I felt very like beneath these people. And I didn't want to be. I wanted to be like on their level. And clearly I wasn't. Like a 6-year-old kid is not going to know as much about life as a 30-year-old teacher will. But instead of being smushed and stepped on and kept down, I wanted to be like lifted up and like see eye to eye somehow, or kneel down and see me eye to eye, like some way to connect at that level, because I'm not a child. I was a child, but I didn't feel like a child. I felt like an adult that's like developing and turning into small adult into big adult. And so I wanted that. And I felt like what I got instead was sit down and shut up. And these are the rules. And
so often we hear about little fives who want to keep it real and not like, don't talk down to me and don't condescend to me. Don't treat me like a little person when I have so many complexities inside of me. See me for that.
Right. Yeah, I didn't like it was a problem. And so I guess to go back to answering your question of what was the arrogance was a way to just yell from the rooftops that you're not as special as you think you are. Me to the adults, like you're not all that. Mm-hmm. You have flaws, you have insecurities. You're a human just like me. You've been around longer, so you have some more experience, but you're not on another level. You're not like a greater human.
And if people come to us knowing their insecurities, their flaws, their humanity, then there's room for me to have mine too, right? Then you don't have to pretend that you're arrogant and know it all, right? You just get to be real with that too. And even as a little being, you knew that.
Yeah, 100%.
It seems so obvious, doesn't it? It seems so clear.
It does. And just to double click on that failure comment. So, I mean, like I said, I don't experience you in this place where you would kind of just said a second ago that you were feeling like you felt like a failure. I just don't experience you that way. And so, I mean, I know that these kinds of things we grow up and we get patterns and we get, we can see our own worthiness, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just curious, like, take us back to that time when you were feeling that way. I just, like I said, I'd like to know more.
In particular with like my kid when he was born.
Yeah. Or I mean, that is not something that's all of a sudden, you don't just feel that, like one day you were feeling, I'm feeling on top of the world, and the next day I'm feeling like a failure. That comes over time, right?
I don't know. I actually think I probably struggle to really define and understand my relationship with failure, because there are lots of pieces where it's terrifying to think of being a failure. It influences to a great degree how competent I am at a lot of things.
I think this is also why 3 and 5 get confused so often. People who are 3s and 5s mistake themselves for those types. They're lookalikes, and the competency has a lot to do with it. Competency triad, 1, 3, and 5.
Yeah. I also tend to really get along with my fellow competent homies.
Glad I fit there.
Yeah.
I don't know what that says for Rick over there. I think you have a different line of 7 and 5, where you two definitely have your own beat of the drum.
They're all the jokes that maybe only be funny to us, and the random, obscure references. And there's something like that actually with every type. It's actually one of the funner. I'll stick with it. Funner things about learning all the different Enneagram types and how I connect with all of them. There actually is that piece. Like I could go around the Enneagram and talk about somebody, and when you said that about 3, I thought about Lance and just driving down the road and just having a conversation, a no bullshit conversation about like race cars or sports or something like that, where there's just, I can feel really connecting at that competent level. And it's nice to connect with, because I enjoy being around somebody like that, but also there's a lot of reassuring in myself that I'm actually not full of shit. I know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And I really benefit from that.
Well, it's a healing process to disrupt the idea, the idea that we built about ourselves when we were small, for you being a failure, being incompetent, and then covering it up with trying to be very, very competent. And to me, it's not a stretch, even from the pieces that you've already shared about, feeling like you were a failure, failing in your own relationship with being a parent, and to the extent where you wanted to completely interrupt that so that you would have every chance of doing something very different. It's like we all take those patterns that we are, and then we sort of overdo them. Like they become a self-fulfilling prophecy until we take a beat and we see ourselves somehow differently.
Yeah. Hey y'all, it's Clay, and we're going to pause here real quick to share with you a few words of appreciation for our friend Susanne. Now, Susanne is a guide with EPP. She's also on the faculty, and as is often the case, she does a lot of stuff, and some of it has a title, and some of it probably doesn't. What I can tell you about Susanne is that she is an absolute joy to be around. You've probably heard her on previous podcasts, whether it was scheduled or not. There's kind of a running joke where she kind of interrupted a few podcasts once upon a time, unintentionally, of course, and then that just became our joke over the next, year and a half or so now, 2 years maybe. And I love it. It's always fun, and she's always fun. I find Susanne to be extremely wonderful. Just to be in her presence is a gift. And as I usually say, don't just take my word for it. Here are a few things that other folks in the project have to say about Susanne.
I think what I appreciate about Susanne is how she can reframe things. Recently, she helped me reframe something that I was experiencing into a powerful teaching point. She can just do that. She's like a shapeshifter. And she's funny. And she's got that Minnesota accent that I love. And yeah, I really see the light in Susanne.
So, I have so many different connection points with Susanne in the organization, but I think that and of course she is incredibly capable in so many different ways of helping, and and continuing to push the project forward. But the place that I always really, one thing I appreciate about her is her heart. And it's actually, it's a kind of a playful heart. And I, people have heard about my story, that my move is to move towards type 4s, and it wasn't always easy for me. And Susanne, it actually is really easy. It really is. It's just lovely to kind of witness how much she can show up in such heartfelt ways, and I can draw inspiration from that place and be someone who's better just by knowing her and being in spaces with her.
I have the great pleasure of being able to work with Susanne in so many ways. I probably see her more than I see my family via Zoom, and I adore her. There is a way that she holds everything in this world with both lightness and the gravity with which it deserves. And she can bring humor to almost anything without disregarding the importance of whatever it is that she's bringing humor to. And she's really taught me how to focus on, and it's such a shift for me in my type structure, but on how to approach things with this idea of wonderment, which for me is beyond curiosity. But I don't think I would get half of my projects done if I didn't have Susanne shoulder to shoulder with me. So deep, deep appreciation for Susanne, and for Mike. Mike, you are a saint in all the ways. You were constantly bringing Susanne food and tea and coming on these EPP camping trips. And really your support and love of Susanne allows Susanne to show up so freaking fully in all the ways that she does at EPP. So appreciating both of you, appreciating how you model what relationship is. Adore you both. See you soon.
Well, I know she's not a 7, but Suzanne's totally in the 147 triad, and I feel her there. And we've had so many fun adventures in this project. And Susanne is my thrift sister. She sends me little relics from thrift stores in this box that we sent back and forth for a while. She's the historian for EPP. And I don't know where she keeps all her binders, but it seems like every time we're like, where's the, she just reaches outside of the Zoom camera and she's like, it's right here. And she brings so much levity and joy and perspective and historical perspective. And she also has that nugget of 4, which is just keeping it so flippin' real. It says the really, really hard thing without ever letting go of her heart. And what a gift.
What I feel when I'm with Susanne is a field of compassion and curiosity, and a capacity to honestly be with everything that is. There's such a receptivity about Susanne and what I would call maybe an allowance, or like an allowing of all things. And so encapsulated in that really are all the qualities, the essential qualities of the Enneagram. Like I feel my own strength and how she holds herself and how she sees the beauty and the depth that is present in every moment. And I have experienced that in relationship with her in one-on-one and exploring the depths of my own grief, and also in celebrating the joys of being a parent and a daughter and a sibling. And I've also experienced it in the classroom and how she is as a guide and as a teacher, as somebody who really embodies and exemplifies the work that we're up to, and has journeyed to some great depths inside of herself that she's able to hold others with a great deal of compassion and curiosity, who are taking their steps onto the path as well. So those are just some of the qualities that I appreciate about Susanne, and having her to be able to work alongside of her in this project, all that she does to support the curriculum development and both on our in-custody curriculum and how we're delivering our programs to the public. I just can't imagine EPP without Susanne. I love and appreciate you to pieces.
I want to know about the shock points.
Okay.
That there was something that really preceded that moment where you said, that's it. Or maybe there were a few.
I think there were a few. To where when the final one hit, all the others kind of came online pretty explosively, I would say. So like I said, the last bank is where I was like, that's it, I'm done. That was where I knew that there was a definitive, like, clear end to a part of my life. Like, I was not doing that anymore. I didn't know what was next, but that was over with. And at the same time, don't know what I'm going to do with being a dad, but I'm doing something new and better and different. Don't know about my family, like my mom, my brother, my cousins, my aunts, but something's going to change. Like all of that had kind of just like gradually, like, you know, it's not so much like shock points, but like little seeds that just kind of got planted, and all of a sudden they just all went. Is how I feel about that. And so that was December of 2006. And I think at the beginning, and of course the holidays were all around there, and I hated all that too. And then at the beginning of 2007 is, I think, when I really started thinking, what is the biggest thing that I could do? What is the, like, in a good way, like, what is the most severe? Like, I can't just go back to Candace and say, hey, I want to work it out or whatever. Like, that was too small.
What's the highest risk for the high reward that I'm seeking?
Exactly.
How can I sacrifice my knight for 2 pawns here?
Exactly. Or how can I sacrifice my queen
Exactly
for mate and 4? You know, like it was big, and I didn't know. That's a good chess reference.
That was good.
I didn't know, and also, like, what am I scared of? What do I know how to do? What am I clueless in? Who can I trust? Like all these different things, and where, like, physically, where do I, because I was staying in Oklahoma a lot at the time. All my family is in Texas, and like physically, where do I do this? Do I get a job and kind of start over in another state and just gradually work my way back to Texas? Or do I go back to Texas and physically be among people that are family, but I might not immediately have connection and relationship with them? And so it was like all these, what is the thing? And the only thing that made sense is like just literally just starting from scratch and just going like to the most severe degree of away.
The biggest risk, the place where I would be least likely to have, honestly, safety, security, control,
right,
knowing, understanding of what was
all of it. And of course the obvious, really the only option by that measure. Well, I mean, there is another option. Like death was an option. Like I didn't have an urge to die by suicide. I was totally fine with the thought of dying, though. And what bummed me out about that, though, was like, it's over at that point. Like there is no solving or coming back from that. And so it didn't seem, so I say a lot that I was okay. Like if that's what happened, that's what happened. But what I really mean is like, that was a thing that I could have accepted. And it also seemed really bad. Like it seemed like the worst option, but it's definitely a severe and possible option. But the only thing that really made sense to me, like the bigger, the the big thing was just turning it over to somebody, just saying, I don't, and I had this from my upbringing in church. I was going to church camp and, like these religious experiences where you just turn it over to God. And I had a lot of that as a teenager, especially, where just turn it over to God. Right. And it feels so good. Like that. I remember how that felt, even though I don't believe any of it now, but I do still remember very clearly like how good it felt to just go like lay it all down at the altar and just turn it over to God and just have faith and trust.
I think that's just the point, that there are people that believe all kinds of things. The important thing about the story that you're telling us is that you believed it, that there was something that was unburdening of you being able to speak the truth of where you really were in that moment, that completely unshackled you from the life you were stuck in.
Right. And it's not very often you'll hear me use any kind of analogy that turns the police into God, but which obviously is not what I'm doing. But with the way that feels is that process of just turning it all over to somebody else. Like that was it was like I lost so much weight in that one call or that one conversation, or just no, it was several conversations, but that one decision to fully commit to, hey, here's my shit. And whatever happens.
And I wish you could see Clay, because the whole time that you're speaking, you have your arms open, your palms up, and then your hands outstretched, like there's like all this symbolism just in the freedom of the motions that you're giving, almost like the same posture that you would offer up your hands to be handcuffed. It felt to you like this ultimate letting go.
Yeah, it's totally what it is. It's the same act of submission where I'm giving myself to you.
And in so doing, what'd you find inside of you?
I found myself, first of all. I think the whole process of being arrested and all that, and getting to the jail and having a conversation with someone about it. I first of all, I loved being able to be honest about stuff that was very dangerous to share previously, because prior to that, nobody knew what I had done criminally. So my wife didn't know, my best friend didn't know, my parents, my brother, nobody knew, because A, it's the best way to get caught is to tell somebody. And B, so with my wife and my best friend, I didn't want to burden her with this responsibility of keeping quiet, because she's a rule follower, and I just couldn't imagine, even through our struggles, I did not want that on her back. And my best friend was a police officer. And I actually think that he would have kept it to himself, and I thought it would be weird to put him at some kind of risk for his job if whatever they found out that he knew and didn't say anything. And so just being able to sit down with a detective and just literally tell the details and just say, and at that point it was only talking about the most recent bank, and just being able to talk and just share, and like that little bit of opening up, even though it's details about a crime, that little bit of opening up is very, it's liberating.
Yeah.
Like it feels like I'm less restricted.
Right. Well, so much of what you're talking about is sort of the spiraling down of the 5 and the secrecy and the privacy. And even though it was in lots of ways to protect the people that were closest to you, it kept you even more locked up inside of yourself. And that's just not your nature. It's not your nature.
Right. It felt spiraling up. It felt like I got this image of a staircase, like sharing felt like I was going back up.
No, I meant before.
Yeah.
Yes. You were, I would imagine there was a down the staircase to the bottom before you could spiral up.
I agree 100%. I'm saying that talking and sharing these details felt like the inverse action. It felt like I'm in the basement, but I'm headed up. I'm coming back up. It felt really, you can actually even, it's weird to watch the video of they call it an interrogation, but it's really just an interview where I gave him details. Like I was just relaxed and sitting back. My legs were crossed. And I was just I was probably more relaxed in that conversation than I look now. And I mean, I'm totally comfortable now, but I was very just like I was just chit chatting, and that and it's how I felt, was so like, finally, just relax, just chill out. And by the way, he wanted to talk to me, and yes, it was because he was doing a job. He was getting details about a crime, blah 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 blah. But it felt nice for somebody to want to talk to me, because that had been a while since I'd experienced that too.
And also since you'd allow yourself to be
Right.
known.
Felt really good to connect with another person, even over that.
There's so many analogies and things that are coming through here. But one thing that you were talking about with this, the spiraling down. I always think of that as the vicious cycle. And one of my coworkers once used to talk about the virtuous circle. That's the opposite of the vicious cycle. I always loved that kind of concept of this virtuous circle. It's just, there's so many different analogies going on here.
It works. Feels good.
Yeah.
So, anything else you want to say?
Yeah. So just to complete that day and what it was and why I celebrate it. I mean, the making the choice to, tell on myself and kind of give all this information up, and getting arrested and having the conversation with the detective and this, what is that? Is that the umbrella?
Sounded like a ghost.
The ghost of Jerry Jones. That's the name. That's the detective's name. So the whole day was probably the whole day was probably like 15 or 16 hours from the time I woke up. I called Candace and told her I'll probably be gone for a while. Called the police, and I rode a bus from Oklahoma back to Texas. Like all these actions and events took 15 or 16 hours. And at the end of it all, they took me from the interview room at the police station down to the jail. And it was a pretty raggedy place, actually. It's about what you'd expect a jail to be. It's like in the basement, like no windows. There were 4 cells. There were the old school like bars, like the no walls, but just all bar, like a cage. And there were 4 cells, and each cell had a guy, at least one, some cases 2 guys in there, and some were sleeping off their DUI or whatever. And it's pretty miserable vibe when we open the door to walk in. But I was just walking so lightly. Like I felt so good that the day was over. I had all the conversations that I wanted to have. I said all the things I wanted to say and did the things I wanted to do. And I felt like I had taken such a big step into adulthood, frankly. And I think I was for quite a while, like several years, I was embarrassed to say it that way, but that's really what I felt like I was doing. I felt like I was graduating into like leaving all the childish things and, it's nonsense. I felt like I'd taken a step into being an adult.
Well, in a way, just to double click on the holding cell analogy, and you're talking about this like really wretched place. I think a lot of times there's nothing in there. People are in there, like you're saying, detoxing, all that, whatever. And yet it was the beginning of you being able to hold something inside of yourself that you really hadn't been able to do up until that moment. And then it was a big step.
Yeah, it was huge. And it didn't feel like I was going to jail. Even though it was grimy and cold and musty, and it's like a rat cage inside of a high school locker room. It was gross, frankly. But it felt good. Like I was like, I did my thing in it, and I'm going to lay down and feel okay about this. Before
you go to sleep, when you lay down, what happened on your bus ride from Oklahoma to Texas?
Oh, the bus ride. This is actually one of my favorite memories, probably in all of life, not even just on this topic. So I rode the bus from Oklahoma back to Texas, and there was this old dude like sitting next to me, and he was coming from the casino and was kind of jolly fellow, probably, I don't know, 70. And he just was making small talk with me, like, hey, so how's it going? You know, whatever. Where are you headed? And typically small talk is pretty aggravating for me, actually. And it didn't bother me for some reason with him. I was cool with it. Felt good, like just having somebody chit chat with me. He asked me if I was married or how old I was, if I was married, if I had a kid. And, you know, I was just talking with him. And he said, actually, I have this. If I could just, I wrote about this in my book.
You want to read it?
I'll just read it. Cause I really like that guy. And I'm not sure that he was real, by the way. I've doubted for most of my life since then if that was just my imaginary friend or if that really happened. Doesn't really matter. I think he was real.
You think you made him up?
It's possible. I've made up things before. Yeah. I mean, I think he was real. I've wondered because who knows? There's no way to verify it. So, yeah, so this is what I've written previously about. I'll just read it. So talking about the bus ride from Oklahoma back to Allen, Texas. And I said that on the bus ride, I wanted to be alone, but it was full of old people who had just made their daily trip to the slot machines, the casino. And I said that there was a nice old man next to me on that bus ride who spoke to me about life in the way that random old men usually do. He rambled on in the chatty way that says little more than I'm uncomfortable with awkward silence. Still, I had no choice but to listen. And what he said was somehow applicable. I wondered for a long time after that if he were real or if I'd imagined him. God knows I could have used a friend in that moment, imaginary or otherwise. Ooh.
Take a breath.
My new friend talked about how happy he was to be old and that it used to make him sad when he thought about turning 70 because all the men in his life had died in that age range. And he simply didn't want to die young. I mostly stared out the window at the passing earth below me and wondered if he had any idea how much I enjoyed his white noise chatter. He asked me how old I was. I told him that my 28th birthday was just a couple months away on the 4th of July. And he laughed and said, "Oh, freedom baby, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure. Freedom baby." Everyone in a paragraph about my birthday. I don't know if it fits here, but I'll say it anyways. Everyone has something to say about my birthday. And it always annoys me somehow. All I could muster at this old man's comment was a subtle chuckle. It actually didn't feel so bad. He seemed familiar, and it was difficult to dislike him, so I quit trying. He spoke with this charismatic, comforting tone of a man who had already fulfilled most of his dreams and knew just the right words to help fulfill your own. He wasn't condescending when he smiled at me and said, "Oh, I remember 28." He hesitated briefly before continuing with the smile that turned into a soft laugh. And I thought I had it all figured out. I liked him talking to me, but I had no reply, so I simply sat and waited for more. He paused again before continuing. He said, "I hope you don't think you have it all figured out." I mumbled, "No, sir," not realizing that he hadn't actually asked me a question. And he abruptly changed the subject. He asked me if I had any children. I told him about Jet, how he was the largest baby I'd ever seen, 10 pounds, 7 ounces, 22 inches. He was 2 months old and currently at home with his mom. I explained that the previous day was actually our anniversary, but that we were also separated at the time. He insisted that I find a way to fix it. Somehow I didn't want to strangle this old man every time he injected his opinions into my life. It didn't even annoy me. It just felt like I was talking to my granddad. I think that's enough.
What happens for you, Clay? Picking that up again.
I didn't feel like I deserved somebody like that. And I don't think that he even realized like how big it was. He was just being himself. And it's just wild to me that somebody's self can just be so good. And he did remind me of my granddad. And it felt good to talk to him. It felt good to. There's no way he knew what I was doing, like where I was riding the bus to, you know? And it just felt good to be cared for. Mm. And he was so casual and just conversational and just being himself. And it was all I needed.
Mm. So, when we say that everything outside of us is a reflection of us, to me, it doesn't matter even whether you made him up or he was real, because he met you or you met you in the way that you exactly needed in that moment, just with kindness. And in so many ways, you were taking this giant step into the unknown to figure out how to do that for yourself and your adulting, like you mentioned.
I think a large part of why I celebrate today is really connected with the things that he said, and just the idea of like he just the gentle like chuckle as he said, you know, when just the thought of him thinking, I thought I had it figured all out. You know, hope you don't think so. It was so good. Like I can hear it. I can hear his tone of voice, his accent, everything. It was a really good memory for me. I don't talk about that guy much.
And how is that guy reflecting more and more inside of you now than when you met him all those years ago?
I don't know. I think I just find myself inspired by the idea that folks like that are out there, and it's worth aspiring to be something like that. Mm. And to be able to sit with someone without, you know, unloading your own shit on them, or without, you know, telling what they should do or what they did wrong or anything else, and just sitting with them and just casually dropping a few little, you know, little bits of love wrapped up in a casual sentence.
Seems like, again, so obvious. It's so simple what we've learned together, you and me, Clay, and you and me, Rick, and the three of us through EPP, that the thing that we really need when we hurt is a compassionate witness.
Right.
Even if it's a detective just asking a bunch of open-ended questions to get to the truth. And you didn't say it, and you don't have to, but I know that the shock points that gathered up before your son was born were painful places. They were grief points where you didn't have a compassionate witness, because if you'd had one, those things would have moved through you. They wouldn't have lodged inside of you in a way that you had to become secret and spiral and down to the bottom of yourself like this, because that's what we know about the human condition.
Yep.
And so being with that witness is finally having you reflected back to you. And it makes me wonder, just because today this whole circle is about when you turned yourself in, and then of course, spoiler alert, Clay got out.
Yeah.
And what was freedom like for you on the day that you got released from prison?
The day I got out, I don't know that it was more liberating than my first day. I think that of all the days since I decided to step into something new, I still say that my first night in jail was the freest I'd ever felt. And as I fell asleep in this shithole jail, crappy bed, it was the lightest I'd ever felt. And I'm glad I got out, and I celebrate that date every year. And it was awesome, and the stories that go with it were great. I actually don't think they compare to the day that I turned myself in. I think that the cell that they gave me, actually, there was a guy in there. They took him out and put him in with somebody else and gave me the cell to myself. And when I laid down, that was really the freest I'd ever felt. And then the next day was day one, something new. And then, thousands some odd days later, when I got out, it was a lot. I was in a much different place. And I'd already made some of the biggest decisions I could make. And so instead of, where going into the beginning of all that, there was a lot of unknown and a lot of just giving myself up. Whereas getting out of prison, it was, okay, I've practiced this stuff. I've learned some things. Let's put it to the test. And it felt more experiential or experimental, or however you want to say that, but it felt very scientific of like, I'm getting out and let's see if this shit is real. Like I knew, I met you the last year that I was locked up. I met you and heard about the Enneagram, learned about my type quite a bit, some other stuff too. And it was more, I felt like I had a lab coat on. Like, can I do this? Is this real? Go to my first job and deal with people that are now coworkers. And it was a whole different vibe. It didn't feel like, there were moments like, I got out of prison and flew home. Later that night, I flew back to Dallas from Houston. So there was this like taking off, looking out the window and seeing the sunset while I was climbing to altitude, and all that was magical. And it was so filled with joy and hope and promise and future, but it still didn't feel as big, I don't think, as like, there's just something about leaving freedom.
Well, it to me reminds me of there was so much healing that was wanting to happen inside of you. So you literally took a leap of faith. You stepped over this chasm of who knows what, right? And didn't die, right? And landed in prison and actually woke up and lived your next day. And then by the time you were released, it sounds like, I witnessed some of that healing, and I met you when you were way down the path. And you had filled in from the inside, excuse me. And so I think when we do that when we come up into the next set of our circumstances, it's sort of no big deal because you've already not died so many other times up until then.
Right. Also had a lot of support when I got out. I got out and, all the people that I didn't have going in were it was years of time to heal relationships while I was locked up. And that happened. So when I got out, I had support, and I was landing in a much safer place with way more answers. Yeah.
And it feels like, for me, when I think about my birthday, there was a long time where I didn't really like my birthday, and I would always just sort of not be able to find the thing for my birthday. And eventually, it's not that long ago, I just sort of took control of my birthday and did things for me that I could feel really were the things that I really wanted. And so I can just appreciate the fact that we're sitting around this table. We love you so much. But what's beautiful is how much you also love you, and you initiate this ritual for yourself and celebrating this moment of true freedom in your own way and for you. And that way those ripples go out to your boys and everybody in your proximity.
Yeah. Feels good.
It also feels like this particular day is somewhat of a rebirth day.
Yeah. It is. The 21st is where I really can think about like a clearly defined end to a part of my life and where something new happened.
Right.
And in its own way, August 31st is more about leaving. It's actually about going.
Right.
And being out doing.
But the interesting thing about this particular day is it was your choosing.
Yeah.
Right. So all of it was around you. We started this conversation around choice and options, and this was a choice. You made this choice. You said, I have all these options in front of me, and I'm going to make this particular choice because, and then the William Henry Cloud quote, but it's just such an interesting, and this whole part around this freedom baby birthday and the rebirth and your own birthday and really claiming this as your birthday-ish. It's just such an interesting thing.
Yeah.
And what do you see for your next trip around the sun, Clay?
Who knows? I think there's a lot of my everything starts with being a dad for me. That's always it's the priority. That's just how it is. And very, nearby second priority is what we're doing with EPP and like what all the spaces that I'm in and conversations I'm a part of and things that we're doing. And I find myself thinking a lot more lately about not just a way to find out how to take the Enneagram into prison, but like how to really fully develop new things that don't exist there. Like the idea of having a resident ambassador and resident guides. And I don't even know if it's okay to share that yet.
Totally okay.
Totally okay.
Because these aren't happening yet. They're conversations that are happening and planning and stuff like that. And I think that, ultimately what we do at the core of my purpose for being involved with EPP is to serve folks who are incarcerated and who are looking for a way out. And there are so many places to influence that, to impact those folks. We do a lot of other cool stuff. The public programming piece, like I've talked before about my mom going through the programming, which was just awesome. I love it. And it's great. And, with all due respect, Mom, I care about those folks in prison. It's not a more thing. It's just that is where my priority is. And my mom is doing her own work, and I'm there. Every conversation she wants to have, I'm there. But I'm also not like chasing her down. And
well, your mom's on the path.
She is, yeah.
Nobody's worried about Sherry.
Yeah, at all. And it brings me a great deal of joy knowing that path and what it is and what it looks like and the conversations that she's having and the way that it's influencing her life.
And the emotional responsibility and adulting that she's also doing, right? And that's another freedom that children get when their parents are doing their own work.
And I think I'd like to restate it and to say that is a nice benefit for me personally and for my mom of how she's come into the fold with all this. And that's not why I'm here.
Right.
I'm not here to be an Enneagram evangelist to my family. I'm here to serve folks who are incarcerated. Everything else is icing on the cake.
Right. To go back to your famous quote, prison's our middle name.
Prison is our middle name. Yeah, it is.
Thank you, Clay.
Thank you. Oh, you can push the button if you want.
Or we can just close with asking you if there's anything that we.
Oh, you know the drill. Last word.
We're gonna turn off our mics. We're not really, but because we don't know
that's
how.
Funny.
But, and let you have the last word here. And before we
the way that I close it, I'm not telling you what to do as the host. Is I throw in a couple things and then say the thing. but you do how you want. You want me to just end it, wrap it up?
This is fun to me, by the way. Right. I mean, I feel like it's a little bit of WWE.
Yeah.
You know, Susan and I tag teaming.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, it's lovely. It's been a lovely thing, just us being out here in nature and lots of other noises,
Yep.
Long borders and planes and birds and
all the sounds that are in the world we're in.
Right. And it's been lovely to just catch up with you in this way. And I would love to give you the last word and go from there.
Well, first of all, I appreciate it. This was not my idea to sit and chat. We had plans, you know, for this weekend, and you know, I was in San Diego right before this, and I think I tried to cram too much into not enough time, and it wasn't even on my radar. I knew that I would be here on the 21st, obviously. It didn't even dawn on me to sit and have a chat around this, and so I really just creatively, I appreciate the idea, and I think it's cool, and at a personal level, I appreciate the opportunity to sit and talk about it. And it really is one of my favorite days on the calendar, period. And I look forward to it every year. And I love to think about it. And I love to remember. And even the parts where it's a little uncomfortable and rattles me on the inside, I do, at the end of the day, I do really feel good about all that May 21st represents for me. And so I have gratitude for being able to sit and chat about it and being able to share that with folks. So I think that's where I'll end with that. I really feel good, and I'm thankful, and this was good for me. EPP is on a mission to understand why we do what we do, using the Enneagram to inspire transformation on both sides of the bars through self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-compassion. For more information about EPP, please visit EnneagramPrisonProject.org. We appreciate your time and attention today. Please stay tuned for future episodes of the podcast, which you can expect right here on the first Tuesday of every month, as we continue to tell the story of the Enneagram Prison Project.